What is the difference between a Christian and a disciple? Sound like a perplexing question? Well, for many, it just might be. I'm sure you've seen the person who has profanity-laced lyrics in one of their songs, and they stand up at an award ceremony and says, "I would just like to thank God." And you think to yourself, really? That person's a Christian? My question to you is, how come you've never asked the question, really? Is that person a disciple? Probably when the words Christian and disciple were used during the first century church, they did have the same meaning. Unfortunately, for us in our day, they don't. Jesus tells us what a disciple is. He says that clearly. In fact, over 250 times in the New Testament, the term disciple is used, while the term Christian is used only 3. Now, I'm not trying to say that they're two different experiences. I believe they're one and the same. But the terms over the years have grown further and further apart when at first they were synonymous. In Luke chapter 14, Jesus gave 3 qualifications to be a disciple. He said a disciple must love God more than father, mother, brother, sister, his own wife, and even his own life. He didn't make it any easier in the second qualification. He said that a disciple must live a life of self-denial, self-sacrifice, cross-bearing. Take up your cross and follow me. You must be willing to crucify self, and that on a continual basis. Finally, Jesus said, if anyone would be my disciple, he must forsake everything, even his own concepts of what he can or cannot do. All are to be forsaken. Now, in spite of this gauntlet that Jesus lays down in order for an individual to be a disciple, it seems that in our society, if you love yourself, if you love pleasure, anything that deals with self-indulgence or the overindulgence of appetite, none of those things would disqualify you from being a disciple, from being a Christian. One little story, I think, illustrates the essence of discipleship. King Henry of Bavaria wanted to give his life to be a monk. He had grown tired of the court life, and so he approaches an individual by the name of Prior Richard. He's one of the leaders of the local monastery. And he tells Prior Richard, I want to dedicate my life to you and to this monastery. I want to become a monk, essentially. Prior Richard looks at the king. Do you understand what this means? You know this means that you'll have to live a life of obedience, yes? And you're not used to taking orders, but giving them. The king, in order to reassure the prior that he was fully committed, says, listen, I vow to live a life of obedience to you as you follow Christ. Prior Richard was a wise man, so he says, I believe with a smirk on his face, all right, I've got your first assignment. I want you to go back to your palace, sit on your throne, and rule faithfully in the place that God has set for you. There it is. It wasn't about the king's expectations for discipleship. It wasn't even about whether or not he was going to be accepted into this monastery. Discipleship was solely about obedience. Obedience to the master and obedience to his desires for you. I want to encourage you today to inject discipleship into your Christianity. Whatever the Lord says to you, dear friends, do it. Do it.